Hello again. Many people feel that crime is absolutely out of control in Britain and that the police have more or less given up on many offences which they no longer regard as being particularly important. Shoplifting, for example. I think it fair to say that many ordinary citizens in this country are disillusioned with the police and unhappy with what seem to be their priorities. I am one of that number. The cause of my own dissatisfaction is very simple. When the first police force in Britain was established in London in 1829, the declared aims of the police were very clear, and lip service is still paid to them. In other words, the modern police in our country still claim that they are following in the footsteps of those principles of policing which were laid down by Robert Peel almost 200 years ago. What was the purpose of that first police force, do you suppose? Many people feel instinctively that the purpose of the police was obviously to track down and arrest criminals, but in fact that's quite wrong. Indeed, when the police in London were being set up, it was specifically and definitely stated that this was not the role of the police. Let me quote from what was set out in 1829, and in the description to this video I give a link to these principles exactly as they were written in 1828, 1829. Right. To prevent crime and disorder as an alternative to their repression by military force and severity of legal punishment. To recognise always that the test of police efficiency is the absence of crime and disorder, and not the visible evidence of police action in dealing with them. In other words, the aim of the police should not be to detect crime and then later catch the criminals. The police are supposed to deter crime. They should prevent it from being committed in the first place by their very existence and presence. This is the theory, and very sound it is too. Few of us will be minded to steal a car or mug somebody if we know that at any minute a policeman might come round the corner. Common sense, really. Let's stop for a moment and think about this very sensible idea, and then ask ourselves when last we actually saw a policeman coming round the corner. That is to say, a policeman walking the pavement who you saw looking around him and checking that everything was all right. Of course, we catch fleeting glimpses of police officers from time to time, hurtling past us in police cars. But when last did you make eye contact with a policeman? See him on the streets, patrolling to keep an eye on the area in which you live? You see, well within living memory, that is what it was like in London and other English cities. The local Bobby on the beat was a well-known figure. People even knew his name, and he was certainly familiar with the neighbourhood and would stop and chat to people to check that everything was okay. The presence of a tall, strong police officer really did act to prevent crime. It was less a case, as those guidelines from 1829 put it, of the visible evidence of police action in dealing with criminals. It was rather the, and I quote, absence of crime and disorder which indicated how effective and efficient policing was. Police officers used to patrol their beats within earshot of each other. That's how many of them there used to be on the streets. I can remember when policemen had a silver chain showing at the front of their tunics. This was their regulation whistle, which made an unmistakable and shrill sound which carried a good long way. If a policeman needed assistance, he blew on that whistle and knew that at least one other policeman would hear it and come running. Often more than one officer would come in answer to this signal. That is how well the streets of London and other cities were policed. Little wonder that crime was prevented by this. Those thinking of doing wrong knew that an inquisitive policeman lurked around every corner. The closure of police stations and the withdrawal of police officers from the streets has emboldened criminals, as they know that really they have the streets to themselves. The chances of bumping into a policeman are virtually zero. So it is that the police today rely more on detecting crime after the crimes have been committed. But you see, they're not very good at that. They hardly even make an effort. And if your house is broken into, you'll be very lucky if a police officer even comes to see what has happened. They might give you a crime number for the insurance, that's about it. The police have in effect given up trying to catch burglars, vandals, car thieves, shoplifters, and all the scummy types who make life such a misery for law-abiding folk in this country. I happen to know quite a bit um, about the subject of policing, unlike some of the topics upon which I pontificate. This book of mine, which was published some years ago, details the background to policing in Britain during the 19th century. I'll give a link to it in the description to this video. I act as consultant to various television programs on the subject of policing, executions and so on, which is one of those things that brings me in an extra bob or two then and when.